Simon Kemp, welcome to the content show.
Thank you.
So your report has just come out literally a few hours ago as we record this,
Yeah,
and in some ways it tells us what we already knew, that people everywhere are spending more time online,
yeah.
especially in countries where the lockdown is tightest. Um, from what you're seeing, how stark are the changes to the way we live our lives online? And I guess the question everyone's asking is this going to change us all for good?
So for the most part, it just seems like an extension of what we were already doing, which is, I suppose, a relief in some ways. An awful lot of the increases that we're seeing relate to stuff that we previously only did in our spare time, and now we're doing a lot more of it because an awful lot more people have a lot more spare time. Unfortunately, it's one of those weird things where everybody wanted more spare time, but probably not in these circumstances. So yeah, lots more social media use, lots more watching streaming services, lots more of the stuff like playing games that we used to do only occasionally are now doing a lot more often, and obviously some forms of e-commerce a lot more of, and sadly some a lot less of.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was talking to David just before we were talking about podcasts, and the David's a huge fan of podcasts. Interestingly, because he's not commuting anymore, his podcast sort of listening hours have reduced because he's at
Yeah.
home so much. So it's fascinating stuff. One of the things I thought was really interesting was we've been talking about creative fervor this week,
Mhm.
and I think the figures you've put out show that something like 15% of people sorry, I can say this right. 15% are creating more videos and uploading videos online. Is that correct?
Yeah, so a lot more people are taking time to create their own video content and publish it to various different kinds of channels. Some of that will be on platforms like TikTok, so you're going to see a little bit more of those short form fun videos. Some of it's a lot longer form content, and they're uploading it to platforms like YouTube. We seem to be spending all of our lives on video chats as part of Zoom or as Hangouts or House Party, whatever else it may be. So a lot of people are a lot more comfortable with video than perhaps they would have been this time 3 months ago. And that may be part of the reason. But also, I think an awful lot of it is just ways to combat boredom.
Absolutely. Who's out of all these platforms? Are there any clear winners? Are there any platforms that are really sort of drawing a bigger audience in this time compared to others?
Yeah, so I think it's no surprise Zoom's been all across the headlines because it's had such a massive rise in use, especially for business purposes, but even just for sort of hanging out with friends and family, Zoom's a popular choice as well. So in terms of the data that we've been able to access, and admittedly not every piece of data is out there and it's certainly not perfect at the moment, but data from App Annie, great analysts of what's going on in the world of mobile apps, their latest data shows that Zoom was one of the top 10 most downloaded mobile apps in March, so definite growth for them. We're seeing increased time spent across pretty much all of the social media platforms. I don't think that comes as a surprise, but it's useful to know that the data back up the hypothesis as well. So plenty more time being spent on all of the usual suspects, but especially platforms like TikTok, which are relatively new. They've certainly seen a little bit of a boost over the past few weeks. In terms of absolute user numbers, actually, the data wasn't quite as extreme as I'd expected. I was thinking I was going to see a lot more new users signing up, but that was probably a little bit naive of me. It's not like this has suddenly changed in terms of the number of people that are able to use digital. And I think most people that can use digital already use social media. But what we have seen is a little bit of a resurgence in some of the platforms that people use a bit more sporadically. So Twitter, a big beneficiary at the moment. We've seen quite a big rise in the number of people using Twitter in the last month compared to the number of people that used it in December.
One of the interesting data points was that across all social platforms, the bigger sort of growth or usage is from women. Does
Yeah.
that mean that women were just much more disciplined about their social media use before, or I mean, what I don't know. I don't actually know what the ratio was before, but why do you think that is?
So we tend to see women as more frequent users of social media anyway. So when we talk about the growth of women using social media, this is mostly in terms of time spent. It's not like you've suddenly got a large number of new women starting to use social media. So they've been spending a lot more time on social media over the past sort of well, since the lockdowns began, if you like. So certainly since the start of February, and especially since the start of March, we've seen a significant increase. I suppose this is going to be dangerous because it's making general sweeping statements based on gender, which is always a dangerous thing for a white male guy to do. But
We should
um,
tread carefully here.
we should definitely tread carefully. My suspicion is that women tend to be more sociable than men, and therefore they are turning to social media as their primary means of interacting when they're housebound. Obviously, an awful lot of people stuck in their homes at the moment, so social media is the only real way that they get to socialize. Women tend to be better at making time to meet with their friends and spend time with them in the physical world compared to men. That may be a general statement, a sweeping statement again, but that's the sort of the social stereotype, if you like. And my suspicion is that an awful lot of that activity that did take place in the physical world has moved online. So it's just a lot more of that socializing that was taking place in the real world is now taking place online instead on social platforms. That's not to say that men aren't spending a lot more time on there as well, but we have noticed that a lot of the spare time that men have has been converted into things like playing video games. The stereotype's coming through very strongly in all this data. It's great, isn't it? Plenty of provocation for debate and argument.
So talking about video games, and I'll wrap it up on this question. Just myself, I've not been a gamer since 20 plus years, but I did go out and get a couple of gaming consoles, gaming controllers to use with our Apple TV. For the wife and I, something else to pass the time. I wonder if you've seen much more sort of new user take up in the gaming sector as a result.
No evidence of it being a lot of new users across the data that we're seeing, although my suspicion is that we may get a little bit more insight into that in the coming weeks. But the crucial thing to note is that consoles, obviously a big part of gaming, but a vast majority of that increased time in gaming has been spent on mobile devices. So again, data from App Annie, really interesting to see the number of downloads of mobile apps over the last number of weeks. It's like 30% higher in March compared to December. So just huge growth in downloads, and then great data from Global Web Index as well, showing that the amount of time that we're spending playing games also increased. So if you've been playing a lot of games over the last few weeks, you're certainly not alone. And I suspect that this is one of those few things that will likely continue. We may not have as much spare time, but people are getting back into the habit of playing games. And I think we'll see that endure even after lockdowns have passed.
Lovely, lovely. Well, amazing job as always. 132 slides, 7,000 words. I don't know how you do it. The URL for the report is at the bottom of the screen. So if anyone's interested in having a look, I'd thoroughly recommend it. And thank you very much, Simon Kemp.
Thank you, sir. Great to be back on your show.
Excellent. Thank you.